And good afternoon to everyone. And today I'm pleased to announce that beginning in 2024, the University of Colorado will be returning to the Big 12 Conference. And I'd like to thank our athletic director, Rick George, for his vision and collaboration on this decision. Having been part of our previous conference realignment, I know firsthand that these decisions have far-reaching implications, not just for our campus community, but also for our alumni and fans throughout the country and the world. With that in mind, we determined that joining the Big 12 would provide the stability that will best position CU Boulder for long-term success, both athletically and academically. CU Boulder is a national university, and by spanning 3 time zones, the Big 12 is very much a national conference. The national exposure that joining the Big 12 provides will shine a spotlight not only on our incredible student athletes, but also on our groundbreaking research that really changes the world. Most importantly, the move will have no impact on the academic mission of CU Boulder, other than to enhance the exposure. Our influence as an academic leader is worldwide and will always transcend any specific conference. Our faculty will continue to do their collaborative research with other public and private institutions in the Association of American Universities, whether those institutions are in the SEC, the ACC, the Pac-12, the Big Ten, or our new conference, the Big 12. The Pac-12 is a great conference with vital institutions, and it was a privilege to be a member for the last 12 years. While it's difficult to leave, we're excited about what the future holds for CU Boulder, and as we start our next era in the Big 12. With that, I'll turn things over to our athletic director, Rick George.
Thanks, Chancellor, and welcome everybody. Glad you're here to celebrate with us on going into the Big 12 conference. It's an exciting day for our athletic department and for our entire university. I'm very excited to join the Big 12 conference starting in 2024-25. I want to offer my sincere appreciation for this man to my left, Chancellor DeStefano, who's been a tremendous partner throughout my time in Boulder and was intimately involved in our analysis of what was right for CU. Let me state up front that this move was not just based on money or finances. A decision this big has a lot more to do than just money. At the forefront of our minds in all of our decisions is our student athletes and their experience as Buffs. We've done our analysis, and they'll be traveling less in the Big 12, playing in more favorable time slots where we believe they can get greater national exposure and return to Boulder after away games at earlier times. A lot has been made about linear partners in today's day and age, and partnering with the 2 largest providers in the linear media space, Fox and ESPN, is who we want to be aligned with. Not only will our fans around the world be able to watch us on broadcast or cable television, but as noted a moment ago, the Big 12 time slots on ESPN and Fox will provide our student athletes with great exposure. Playing in the most coveted time slots provides our student athletes, university, and athletic departments with tremendous opportunities. We strive to be innovators in college athletics, and I believe the Big 12 shares that innovative spirit as we do. One example is how they're showcasing their football talent through a conference-wide pro day. We believe they're doing a lot of positive things in this area and will continue to grow in their innovative approach to college athletics. Certainly, revenue and expenses are a part of the equation, and we have looked at the cost that we will be incurring from team travel in the Big 12, as well as the initial rebranding. And when we consider the Big 12 revenue, we believe it's a great win for the University of Colorado. The revenue was not just from a media deal, and there's a lot of talk about that, but from other revenue streams, and we believe that's positive being in the Big 12, an outcome for us. We believe the benefits far outweigh the cost for our move into the Big 12 Conference. As college sports evolve, so do conferences. And it's our responsibility to put CU in a position of strength for the future. And as an AD, conference realignment is always something that we're looking at. I feel strongly that today's decision positions the University of Colorado for years to come. We are honored and grateful to be a member of the Pac-12 for the past 12 years, and we will do our part to be a great peer in this last year of being in the Pac-12 Conference. I'm excited to see our teams compete for and win champions this year and in the future. So with that, Curtis?
Transition to asking questions. It's a moderated Q&A, so please wait for the mic, and we'll get started here with Mick.
First of all, congratulations, Mick Miller, Fox 31. When you compare and contrast the Pac-12 and the Big 12 Conference, and you just see the instability of whether it's a TV deal or teams leaving the Pac-12 Conference, how much of a factor did that play into you guys making this decision to provide, the best environment for your athletes to succeed?
Well, look, one of the key, like I said, there's a number of factors on why we made this transition, or we will be making this transition. One of them had to do with stability. And we feel strongly moving forward that the stability in the Big 12 will give us the platform we need to have success in the future.
Ariel, go ahead.
Hi there.
A move obviously seemed imminent, but why? I'm a professional.
And you're a darn good professional.
A move seemed imminent, but why the Big 12? Why was that the one that seemed like the fit for this university?
Well, look, we looked at it from a lot of lenses. First and foremost, what we felt was best for our student athletes. We thought that was really important. Playing in 3 time zones gives us a lot of exposure around the country. That's not only good for our student athletes and our athletic department, but for our university and community. The distribution of games on Fox and ESPN was an important consideration, and the time windows that we would play in. So a 7 p.m. Eastern time zone versus a 7 p.m. Pacific time zone is drastically different in travel times. And as I mentioned, the student athlete experience is important, and that certainly was a consideration as well.
All right, Pat, go ahead.
Rick, did you ever see a proposed Pac-12 media deal and you deem this to be a better option for the university? Or, were you still waiting to see that and this was just a matter of finding stability like you mentioned?
Well, again, George Kliavkoff is a great commissioner. He's got anytime you negotiate a media rights deal, it's extremely tough to do. And it really came down to, as we've looked at this and looked at the stability that we could get in the Big 12 and the time slots and the partners that they have in the media area, that was a significant factor for us as we made this decision.
Adam, go ahead.
Hi, Rick. Building off Pat's question there, can you take us behind the curtain of what the last 13 months have looked like for you and some of those conversations you've had with your mark in the Big 12 and just kind of how this all transpired, building off Pat's question?
Look, in respect to all the parties that are involved, I'm really not going to get into the details of the process. What I will tell you, Adam, is that as we looked at this during this process, it became clear that the Big 12 was the best fit for us. And again, it was a multiple factors that were involved in that decision-making. But we feel really good about where we are today and what the future looks like for Colorado.
Go ahead, Sean.
Sean Keeler, Denver Post. Question for you both, but first for Chancellor DeStefano. What has been the feedback, first, that you've received from alumni, faculty, et cetera, on this decision, A, and B, in hindsight, was joining the Pac-12 the right move, given that we're back where we, because you were part of this move, Rick wasn't 12 years ago, and do you have any, I don't want to say regrets, but second thoughts about that move initially from a decade earlier?
What I'm hearing from our alumni across the country has been very positive today, and especially after the Regent meeting where we had a unanimous vote We certainly have received many, many positive comments from our alumni, from our parents, from individuals across the country. At the time when we made the decision to move to the Pac-12, at that time, we looked at our alumni base, especially our alumni base in Southern California. And as you know, as we were playing at UCLA, USC, there were many opportunities for that alumni engagement. Well, now UCLA and USC have left. We're still going to be in California recruiting not only student athletes, but recruiting students. Southern California, Northern California, California itself is our major out-of-state school state that we recruit students. So we're going to continue to be in California, but you know, with UCLA and USC leaving to go to the Big Ten, that definitely that would definitely have an impact on alumni relations, especially on game day.
Go ahead, Brian.
Rick, for you, if I could follow up with that. What factor did Coach Prime play in this decision? What influence did he play in this decision, if at all, given he's a Floridian, lived in Texas for a long time? That is going to be the presumption. You can say, no, it wasn't a role. It had to be on some level, I would think.
Look, I try to keep our coaches involved in this process, and, you know, I talked to Tad Boyle, I talked to JR, I've talked to Coach Prime, and certainly I think all of them felt like, you know, whatever you think's best for us, we're going to play whomever you ask us to play, and I will tell you there's tremendous benefits for being in the Big 12 for the direction that Coach Prime's going as it relates to recruiting, being able to play in Orlando against UCF, where he's recruited very heavily. The state of Texas has always been a priority for us, and now playing 4 teams in that area, and then just up north, I think it's north if my geography's right, Oklahoma State, you know, having 4 teams, and then you look at Houston, and Houston's always been a favorable market for us in recruiting. You think back to Alfred Williams and Canavis McGee and Chris Hudson and some of those guys. That area, you know, the 5th largest market in the country, also was a factor in that decision. But again, I try to include all of our coaches in this, and Coach Prime certainly and I had conversations about this, as well as I did with other coaches.
I've got one for Brian Howell from the Boulder Daily Camera. I have one for each of you. Rick, this Big 12 is very different from the one that Colorado left, very different from the Big 8 that you were a part of years ago. What do you like about the makeup of this conference and the teams that are in there? And then for Phil, how was this process different than when you guys switched conferences 12 years ago?
Yeah, so, you know, the conference is different, right? And, you know, I think the fact that we can go to Orlando now, you know, because if you think about the Big 12 in the past, it was all those middle states, you know, around us, the Kansas, the Oklahomas, the Texas, and all that. Now being able to go and play in a Cincinnati, which is a good market for us, and to go into, you know, play in Orlando, Florida, those factors were really important for us because the conference is different than it was today. And the fact that they added Houston, I think is really favorable, the 7th largest market in the country. We recruit really well out of there. I mean, we looked at this thing in very detailed format to make the decision that we did.
So Brian, you're asking me to think back 12 years ago and 13, there you go. No, I mean, think about, you know, the Big 12 back then. I mean, there were a number of schools that were leaving at that time. Nebraska was leaving to go to the Big Ten. Missouri went to the SEC. There were discussions, obviously, we looked at moving to the Pac-10 at the time, later with Utah to become the Pac-12. So there was that instability that was going on in the Big 12 at the time, which now I look at and think about the resilience of the Big 12. I mean, many people back then thought that was it. That was the demise of a conference, and it didn't turn out that way. It just turned out the opposite. I think they became stronger. So it was at a time when there was quite a bit of movement going on in the Big 12, and Colorado was asked, we were invited to join the Pac-10, and we did.
Ariel, go ahead.
Yeah, I also had a question about Coach Prime's influence on this, but not about recruiting. How important was it that he had visibility, and that's why you joined this conference, because of the media rights and knowing that you'd have these games on ESPN and Fox, and that it was locked in, and you didn't know the stability of the Pac-12?
We've certainly talked about the Prime effect a lot, and certainly him becoming our head football coach. If you look at our social media accounts and all of the different areas that you can measure on the impact that he's had, again, I'm certain that, you know, a 1-11 team that have struggled like we have, with him being involved was significant. But if you look at the strength of all of our sports programs, because this is about our sports program, and you look at what JR did in women's basketball, and you look at the class that Tad recruited and the excitement about this upcoming year, our soccer program, and, you know, just across the board, we're having success. And I think all those are important points for us to talk about.
Bring it back over to Mick here.
Yeah, obviously in recent years, there's been drastic changes in college athletics, whether it's NIL or conference realignment, and the discussions surrounding these things have, you know, obviously been polarizing depending on whose opinion. But when you're making these moves such as conference realignment, how important is it for you guys to also, you know, try to do the best revenue-wise, obviously, because that's important, but also making sure that the focus is placed on these student athletes and that they're being put in the best position to succeed?
Well, again, I will answer that, but, you know, in our board session that we had today, I think Regent Spiegel really said it well about the mental health and the wellness of our student athletes, and that's always going to be at the forefront of our decisions. And that's an important factor in anything that we do, but the experience that our student athletes have is the most important thing that we look at on any of the decisions we make.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
With the hiring of Coach Prime and now the conference change, what has changed at that front office and the AD office in the last few years just to make these big splashes?
Well, look, again, you know, we're always trying to do what's best for, and you're probably getting tired of me saying it, what's best for our student athletes, for our department and our university. And when you make these kind of decisions, and we've had to make some big decisions, you've got to do your due diligence, you've got to do your analysis, and you got to always focus on what's your North Star. And if our North Star is what's best for our student athletes, it's easy for us to make a decision on what's best for this department. And as we looked at the Big 12, we felt strongly that this was going to provide an experience for our student athletes that we think is important for their long-term success, and that's always our goal.
Go ahead, Sean.
For you both, you've made a point to de-emphasize this narrative, but you know it's going to be out there, and it already is. What do you say to those who are going to take away from this move as an indictment of the Pac-12, an indictment of George Kliavkoff? And again, you said it's not that, but what do you say to those fans here who will think that and that will carry that from this, given that not just what you're doing, but USC and UCLA as well, if you both had a thought on that?
But again, I'll start first. George Kliavkoff is doing as good a job as he can do, and he works his ass off, and he works tirelessly for the members of the Pac-12. I wish them nothing but great success in the future, and I'm certain that they will have great success in the future. But this decision wasn't about that. It was about this, and that's the Big 12 Conference and what's best for CU and CU athletics and our student athletes, and that's what we made our decision based on.
Yeah, I would just add that I was on the search committee that hired George, and I think George is a wonderful individual, and he's doing a very good job at being the commissioner of the Pac-12. Like Rick, I put as my top priority the experience that our student athletes have and the visibility that our student athletes have. And like Rick, I believe that moving to the Big 12 Conference is going to give our student athletes much more exposure than what they were getting previously. We mentioned the 3 time zones. We mentioned, you know, the platforms being on ESPN and Fox. Those things to me were important factors in making the change, making sure that our student athletes had the best possible experience while they're here at the University of Colorado Boulder.
Yeah, and one more thing that I want to say about that. The Pac-12 conference has been a great conference for us. And they've represented us well. And I've got a lot of peers in that conference that I care for. And, you know, this decision was a difficult decision, but it was the right decision for CU. And it was all about looking ahead, not looking behind us. And we're going to focus on this year to be great peers to our conference members. We're going to compete as hard as we can to win championships. A year from now, we'll really focus on what's ahead then.
For either one of you, just 6 days ago, the commissioner was in Las Vegas and talked about his confidence in the conference going forward and how everybody was together, and said he was asked about other conferences poaching teams. He said, I'm not concerned about that. Well, here you guys are, you're leaving for another conference. Do you feel like you guys caught the conference off guard, and have you had reaction from any of your peers in the last couple days?
Look, again, I've said this a long time ago, in this process, that we were proud members and we are proud members of the Pac-12 conference. And we are proud members of the Pac-12 conference. It really came down for us on, again, what's best for our student athletes. So regardless of how that's couched, do I think I caught my peers off guard? I don't believe so. But again, that's a question you have to ask them.
I think the only thing I would add, Brian, is that all the decisions that I make as chancellor, those decisions are always with the best interests of the university in mind. And that's what this decision was about. What's best for the university, especially for intercollegiate athletics and our student athletes.
For Phil, going back to joining the Pac-12, a couple of the selling points beyond athletics was the West Coast alumni base for Colorado, the like-minded research institutions that you alluded to in your opening. For those, donors or those in administration that might still be important to, what is your message to them or explanation to them with going back to the Big 12?
Well, I think, Pat, on the first part, as I mentioned earlier, with UCLA and USC leaving, that presented a problem. That doesn't mean that we're not going to be in California meeting with our alumni and donors and parents. I already have planned, I think, 2 or 3 trips in the fall to do that. So, I will continue, and I know Rick will continue, and others to work with our alumni, parents, fans, donors in the California market. As I mentioned, my primary purpose in this change was our student athletes. And the priority was to make sure that they had the best experience during their time here at CU. The research will continue. The research that our faculty are doing with faculty members in the Pac-12, they'll continue to do that. They will also continue to do collaborative research with faculty in all the other conferences. So my primary purpose was, as I mentioned, our student athletes. And the collaborative research will still go on. The alumni engagement will still go on in California.
And Pat, just from our perspective, our Buff Club and Leon Jackson III's over there who heads that up, it's always going to be a priority for us to go out and visit with our alumni, our donors, and our fans out there. And that won't change. Our effort on the West Coast will still be paramount in our fundraising opportunities and our friend-making opportunities, because we know we have a lot of former students there, but we also know that the Dallas market is a really important market for us, and we've got a lot of fans and friends and donors in that area as well. So we won't turn our backs on it. As a matter of fact, we'll make a more concerted effort to be present there, since we don't have games that bring us there.
Okay, we have time for 1 or 2 more. Go ahead, Brian.
A couple quick questions for you. On football scheduling, you have a bunch of non-conference games scheduled against some of these Big 12 teams in future years. I assume the process begins at trying to fill some of those spots. And then also just a second question for you. As you've
When
talked
you
to...
ask me to, I got to write it down, Brian.
Okay, let's do that one first, then go to another
I
one.
mean, I am getting older.
At least he didn't ask you about what happened 13 years ago.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what happened yesterday. Anyway, the question,
Go with that one first. You guys have some non-conference games.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we play Kansas State and Houston. And again, those were concerted efforts for us to play in those, at those institutions. So we'll have to dissolve those contracts, obviously, and then we will look to fill those games as quickly as we can. But what I think it gives us an opportunity to do is create more home contest here, because we may go out and look for opponents that are just going to play in Boulder 1 year. So rather than having 6 games, we'll have 7, which again helps us in revenue generation, for our department. And then the second question.
Second question now. As you've talked to your head coaches, do you feel like there's some excitement? I know they've liked being in the Pac-12, but is there some excitement about playing a different set of teams and establishing some different rivalries?
I'll tell you that on Monday after I meet with our head coaches, which I do once a month. But, we didn't have a lot of time to talk about, their excitement or whatever. But I know a couple of the coaches have reached out and they're excited about being in the Big 12 in 24-25, but their focus and our student athletes' focus are what's ahead starting August 1 when our student athletes start reporting back for fall camp.
All right, final one, go ahead.
Hey guys in the back here. Richie Cozzolino with CBS 4. You've talked a lot about the student athletes and the stability and exposure they'll get. Did you guys do much research into what they think about a jump to the Big 12? What did they hear?
Yeah, look, in these type of decisions, you don't involve a lot of people in that. We certainly believe that we know what our student athlete, what's important to them, and what we provide our student athletes in the support in mental health and academic support and leadership and career and our psychological health performance department. Those things are really important for our student athletes. They know that our priority is them, and when we make decisions, it's going to be in their best interest. And again, we believe that the decision we made is in their best interest, and I'm certainly looking forward to meet with all of our teams when they come back to answer their questions and talk through the process and why we are where we are.